Welcome to Essentials to Heal Yourself. I'm Laura Lee Humphreys. So today we're going to have a conversation about what creates disease. And it's actually really simple when you get down to it. And you may be saying, well, Laura Lee, I kind of already do know what creates that. The medical professional tells us X, Y, and Z. And I said, and my response to that is yes. They do know a lot of things about the progression of disease, the deterioration that happens as cells break down. And I'm looking at, can they answer the question of what initiates the breakdown and disease process? Oftentimes when you go to your doctor and ask him, so what causes diabetes? What causes cancer? What causes inflammation of the heart or any of the other big things? You know what they're going to say? Often they'll say, oh, we don't know. And in some respects, they are telling the truth. I have to give them that, because in the medical schools, they are not taught what actually creates disease. Therefore, they can be giving you an honest answer. On the other hand, the answer of what creates disease has actually been known for a very, very, very long time. It's not a mystery. It's not an unsolvable question. It's just a lot of people, when they're in the academia land, in the medical establishment land, they're so indoctrinated to that perspective and that mindset, they literally cannot see anything outside of that box. And the answer to what creates disease actually exists outside of that box. So you've got to keep things into perspective. When they say they don't know, yeah, they're probably telling the truth because they were never taught. Because within their academia land of the medical schools, big pharma, and the conventional medical industry, that answer doesn't exist there. It's not good for their business model. It would put them out of business if you actually knew this and if they actually taught this. Hence, we have the system that we have today. So I ask you, do you know what creates disease? It's actually quite simple. It comes down to two things: a toxic internal environment and a toxic external environment. So let's look at both of those. We'll first start with the toxic external environments, because that's something that we can all make an easy correlation to and see very readily. And even not so readily, but then you have to start digging, and then you go down a few rabbit holes to learn the truth of what's actually occurring in this world to make people so sick. So toxic external environments. Some of them are pretty obvious and plain to see, like, are you in a toxic relationship where someone you are interacting with belittles and demeans and criticizes you all day long? Where you're always walking around on eggshells because you don't know what kind of day they're going to throw at you. And so you are always constantly in a stressed out state. Toxic relationships. Huge contributing factor to disease. Codependent power plays, manipulations, victim mentality, martyr mentality, abusive relationships, very obvious, okay? What about work environments that you're not happy with, that keep you stretched to the max, where you're probably doing the workload of 3 people, and you come home and you just feel like you've got nothing left, that sucks the life out of you. Financial stress because of unsavory work environment or unfulfilled work, where you're not able to find work that actually supports you of what you require to live. Inflation, bad political decisions and policies that wreck the economy for people. You don't have to look too far for that one. Financial stress. Not only is that a huge contributing factor for divorce, it's also a big contributing factor in disease. Anything that's in your external environment that's going to stress you out and keep you in a stressed out state anxious state for long periods of time is going to wreak havoc with the insides of you within your body, and it's going to break down and contribute to disease. Another thing to consider is all of the propaganda, the false narratives, the straight up lies, all the confusion, all the contradictory advice, so-called advice, all of the crap that the media throws out, especially what they've done in the last 3 years to amp up everything. That keeps you in a perpetual state of chaos, of fear, of anxiety, of unknown, of feeling like, oh my God, the world's going to blow up and the sky's going to fall. What am I going to do? How am I going to survive? They want you there in fear. That is a huge contributing factor to disease. So hence, unplug from time to time. Another factor of external toxicity is toxic load everywhere you can imagine. And it's quite shocking when you start looking into all of this and everything you could think of. The groups and individuals and political parties and people that have been running the planet that think that they are God, psychopathic gods, mind you. A lot of those people have done everything that they can in their power to weaken humanity. So they poison everything. And I do mean literally everything. There's poisons and toxins in the water, fluoride, chloride, among other things, prescription drug residues, recycled sewage. It gets disgusting when we talk about the quality of water. In our air, look up in the sky. Do you see actual clouds? Do you know what clouds look like anymore? Or are they chemtrails? There's a huge difference. I remember when I was growing up in southern Idaho, there was never chemtrails because they hadn't started that project. So they hadn't ramped it up back in the day when I was growing up. Chemtrails. When you look in the sky and see crisscross tic-tac-toe lines, straight lines that diffuse out and have this weird iridescent glow to it, that's not normal. It's chemicals. They're spraying the cloud, spraying the air, thinking that they have to dim the sun. Again, we're dealing with crazy psychopaths here who want to do harm to humanity. Chemtrails, heavy metals, all kinds of toxic chemicals are in those chemtrails. They fall down, you breathe them. Toxic chemicals in all of the products we bring into our home. A lot of the chemicals within the furniture, the drapery, the bedding, on and on and on. A lot of the things inside our homes off gas and create toxic air for us to breathe. Toxins in our food. This is like huge. If you don't read labels, if you don't start looking into how your food is prepared, if you eat meat, how those animals are cared for, what they were fed, how much antibiotics and horrible vaccines and drugs they were pumped up with, how diseased those animals actually are, which diseases the flesh, and then you eat it. There's chemicals and toxins all over in the food supply, and it's only getting worse. Then you have all of the toxins and harmful chemicals in all of the drugs, in all of the shots, in all of the vaccines. And yes, I know vaccines are a huge controversial issue because people don't want to look at what's actually going on within that industry and why they cause so much damage. Why is there such a controversy? Because of the crap that's in them and what they are doing to people. It's very dark. I suggest you go look into it if you want to find some truth, especially about to understand what creates disease. So you've got all of this toxic load everywhere you look. We are in a toxic fishbowl. You know, think of when in a fishbowl, when you've got a couple of fish in there, when you don't clean the water after a while, like it's quite filthy. What do you think is going to happen to the fish? It's quite obvious. Do you really think your body is any different in the conditions of what keeps you healthy and what creates disease? So it's common sense. But because we've been so indoctrinated and even, I dare say, brainwashed by the educational system and by the media and by the pharmaceutical industry and the medical industry, that they don't want us to see these things. so that we can trot off to them to ask them for answers so they can give us drugs which poison us further and create more problems. That's their business model. So one of the things and reasons why I'm even doing this podcast is to shed light on things like this so that you can educate yourself, learn about what's actually occurring in the world, and make different choices to preserve your health and your sanity and your emotional balance and learn to heal yourself. So that's an example of some of the external toxins that contribute to disease. So what are internal toxins, the internal toxic loads? Well, this is a big list too. So let's run through a few of them. What about your toxic thoughts? When you look at yourself in the mirror, what do you say to yourself? Are you always berating yourself, criticizing, demeaning yourself, telling yourself how bad you are and how you can't do anything and how no good you are? Because that's what you've been told your whole life by other people. Do you have toxic emotions when you're filled with guilt and rage and shame and confusion and anger and grief and anxiety and depression and sadness, and the list goes on and on? Those are toxic emotions. When you have toxic emotions and toxic thoughts and you don't know how to deal with them, or you just blatantly won't learn and won't go through the effort to ease yourself of the toxic thinking and emotions so that you can actually feel better, those are big contributing factors to disease. Other internal factors are the result of the crap that we slather on our skin, all the chemicals, toxic carcinogen chemicals, ingredients in all of the products that we put on our skin, the cosmetic, the body wash, the shampoos, the laundry detergent, on and on and on. All of that toxic load goes into the body. It's absorbed through the skin, through our breath, goes into the blood, and it wreaks havoc because they are toxic chemicals. Toxic meaning they are dangerous to the body. They have no place, no business being in the body because they do harm. And they break down the function of tissues, which creates disease. So all of these toxins go in there. Then your liver has to deal with all this crap and break it down into a more inert state so that it can then be hopefully released into the colon, into the intestinal tract, and then exited through the back door. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't, because the liver gets so overworked and backed up and sluggish that it has a hard time working and doing its job because you're creating such a toxic internal environment within your body. And so what happens next? Well, the body knows it has to get rid of all this crap. So it will use the next route of exit, which is your skin and your respiratory system. So if you're loaded up with skin rashes or eczema or psoriasis or aging spots or liver spots, things like that on your skin, that's actually your body trying to rid itself of the crap and the toxins and the waste so it doesn't deteriorate even further, okay? Same thing with respiratory issues and sinus infections and allergies and asthma and on and on and on. Same concept. The body's trying to rid itself of crap and you keep pushing it down by taking more drugs. So other things that create a toxic internal environment are microorganisms, parasites, fungus, yeast, mold, flukes, all kind of bacteria, pathogenic, I call them critters, just an overarching umbrella category or to label of all of the critters, microorganisms, and parasites, which feed off of a host. And what happens when they feed off of a host is they have their wastes, they break down, they die, they decay. Their wastes that they produce are extremely toxic to the body. And so one of the things that the body has to do to protect the rest of the organs in the environment from all those toxic wastes is to do something, contain all of this stuff from all these microorganisms. And so what does it do? The body will create a garbage can to put all these toxic wastes in them. Those are known as tumors. It is known, and there are doctors that are starting to talk out about this more and more, which is a good thing. When you do a biopsy of just about every single cancer, you're going to find parasites in them. Parasites are one of the leading contributing causes of cancer, along with things like digestive issues, liver issues, brain issues, heart issues. Parasites can go anywhere in the body and they wreak havoc. And depending on the type of parasite, they will lay lots of eggs. And when those babies hatch, then it just blooms and mushrooms. The population of parasites in the microorganisms even further. And so if the immune system becomes overwhelmed in trying to deal with all of this, then you become susceptible for flus and colds and sicknesses and feeling icky because your body's trying to deal with all of this internal crap. Okay. So what happens when over time, say if you never clean house, if you're always constantly loading up your body with toxic load of all of this stuff, and I haven't even mentioned the EMFs and the radiation. That's a whole other level of toxic load, of the frequencies, the dirty electricity. If you never do anything with this situation, what's going to happen? The body becomes overwhelmed. The organs become overwhelmed. The immune system, like I said, becomes overwhelmed with all of this toxic load, all of these parasites having a heyday in the environment, because you're creating a festival for them. You're creating the Hilton experience for all these parasites. The type of environment that they love to be in and thrive in. So from this, I'm hoping that you can deduce that much of this is under your control, 100% under your control. Whether or not you allow the insides of your body to become such a toxic sludge environment that invites all of these pathogenic organisms, that is filled with all of these heavy metals and toxic chemicals that are known to cause cancer, that are known to be dangerous to your nervous system and your brain function, and are known to throw your endocrine system off, and are known to throw your estrogen levels off. Pay attention to what you're doing. Look at what you are bringing into your body. The toxic load of the internal environment is what creates disease. In this toxic environment, and then you couple that with toxic thoughts and emotions about yourself and your life and the people in them, or in your life, the DNA of the body, of your body, your genetics, responds to the environment, and they make proteins accordingly. The environment and your mindset have a huge gargantuan impact on what genes are expressed and how they express. The genes have an option of producing, each gene can produce several thousand different proteins. They can choose whichever one. What's going to influence the choice of protein production that they do? Your mindset, the toxic load or lack thereof within your body are the biggest factors that determine what your genes are read, which then determines what proteins are produced. And those proteins will either lead to greater health or degeneration. Those proteins will lead to cellular dysfunction. That, coupled with the interference from all of these toxic chemicals that are floating around in your body, from all of the products that you slather on your body, and all of the food and the water and the drink, and the drinks and the air that you breathe, all of those toxic poisons and chemicals interfere with the chemical production or chemical activities of the body that it knows it needs to do in order to maintain health. So when you've got that chemical interference, and then you've got your thoughts and emotions and a toxic environment that are influencing the genes to express in disease-producing ways, what do you expect? This is not that difficult to figure out when you understand these different vectors and you understand true principles of health and what's actually going on in our country, in our world, to weaken and make people diseased. And believe me when I tell you, this is highly intentional by the crazy people running this planet. This is very intentional. So when you have all of this stuff going on within the body, I'm going to add in another factor that makes it more difficult for the body to deal with all of this, and that is nutrient deficiency. If you do not have the raw materials that your body requires to make the amino acids, to make the hormones, to make the enzymes, because you're depriving yourself of the vitamins and the minerals and the base nutrition that your body requires, then it has even a harder time to deal with all of this toxic soup. It has a harder time to break down and recycle the toxic chemicals and make them inert. It has a harder time supporting the immune system to stay strong to deal with all of these critters. Okay, so it comes down to very simple things when you look at it: toxicity, inside and out, and nutrient deficiency. When the body has too much of one thing and not enough of another, then of course the cells are going to break down. The communication between cells, the communication between DNA and the replication of DNA is compromised. When you've got one generation of cell that's compromised, its function is going to be compromised. Therefore, when it goes to divide and create daughter cells, those daughter cells are also going to be compromised because they didn't have what they needed to begin with either. And over time and distance, say you've got half a dozen different generations of cells, you've got a weakened, compromised organ. That's what disease is. Breakdown. Okay. Another thing that I want you to consider when you're looking at the body, another way that I want you to look at the body, is to understand that the body, a lot of the organs, a lot of the systems and structures, they're tubular. Look at your GI tract from mouth to back door. That's one big gargantuan tube, very long. Okay. Look at your lymph system. That's miles and miles and miles of tubing. Your circulation, your circulatory system, all the blood vessels, miles and miles and miles and miles of tubing. Your nervous system, miles and miles and miles of tubes and wires. Okay. The body is 70% water, and much of the structure of everything in the body is tubular, tubes. For fluids and energies and enzymes and things to flow and to move. As I mentioned in other videos and other episodes, life is movement. Energy, life force, things must move within your body to keep you alive. So when you look at tubes, what can go wrong with them? Not that many things. Let's take, for example, the GI tract. That's one of the first systems or areas where breakdown occurs, is because it's the closest to the crap that you put in your mouth. And then your stomach, your organs, your pancreas, your liver, all of your intestines has to deal with all that crap. Okay. So looking at a tube, it can be bent or twisted. It can be cut, broken. It can be burned, become inflamed. It can balloon out, where there's a part of the wall of the tube that becomes weak. And so there's a lot of internal pressure that pushes against the wall. And so little balloons are formed, known as diverticulitis. And then crap and infestation and bacteria and parasites and critters get within those little pockets and create havoc. What else can go wrong? It can get clogged, loaded with filth, loaded with toxic load. It can get cracked and dry and brittle. It can develop little growths where The cells in that area break down because of the factors that I talked about earlier. So now you've got a patch of malforming cells that can't communicate very well with each other because of the mechanisms that I described before, so that they start dividing abnormally or growing abnormally. Then you've got what's called the growth or a tumor. So when you look at this, when you break it down to simplicity of what can go wrong with the tube, it's very obvious what you need to do to correct it. And it's obvious to see what can happen when you don't. The biggest thing within the body, especially the GI tract, is clogged tubes. How do you clean out a tube? You run fresh water through it. You stop putting crap down it. You allow the water to soften and moisten and dissolve all of the debris that's lining the tube, so that the opening for fluids to go through that tube is the normal circumference within that tube, rather than having it squeezed down to such a tiny little opening that the pressure builds up, and then you've got high blood pressure. Then you've got constipation. Then you've got backed up lymph. Okay? Learn how to clean out the tubes. It's very easy when you break it down like that. So those are the things that are the primary causes, or are the causes, I should say, correct myself here. Those are the causes of disease. Clogged tubes, malnourishment, deficient nutrition, toxic internal environment with all the chemicals and the parasites and microorganisms, and the toxic external environments. How many of these things are under your control? The majority of them. Who decides what gets put into your mouth? You do. Who decides if toxic things are injected into your arm? You do. Who decides what you think and what you speak and what you feel? You do. Who decides whether or not you stay in a toxic relationship? You do. Who decides whether or not you stay in a job that sucks the life force out of you, that does not pay you enough to live, and thus creating havoc and stress? You do. You have 100% control over all of these things. Granted, we can't control all of the stuff that comes at us from political people, from all the crazy people trying to destroy humanity, from all the crazy people wanting to put chemicals in the food. You don't have to buy that food. All the crazy people wanting to spray the air, put chemtrails in the air. We can still do some things to help mitigate that. You have more control over your health than you think. You have more power than you think you do. Stop buying into the propaganda, the social brainwashing bullshit that tells you that you don't, that tells you that you're helpless, that tells you that you're a victim, that tells you you're a martyr, that tells you there's all of these big factors and all this big daddy corporations and institutions out there that control everything and that you can't do anything about it. Stop buying the nonsense and look at what you can do for you. Learn to unplug from all of the media that's telling you crazy things that make you feel anxious when you leave, or as a result of listening to that. Stop buying into the bullshit. Learn through principles of health. Learn what causes disease, like about what I'm talking about. If you want to do some research in some of the things of like what are the ingredients going into food, what's in the chemtrails, go take it upon yourself to educate yourself further. Go learn about those things and learn about what creates disease. It's very simple. And when you do, then it also, by default or definition, you also come to understand what to do to correct disease, what to do to heal yourself. Basically doing the opposite of all of the things that I just talked about. Stop bringing all the toxic crap in your life. Okay. So with that, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you found it insightful, that it brought a lot of things for you to think about, a new perspective on things. So, and with all my episodes, I always have a gift for you. This one's no different. So I have a downloadable guide that talks about the 3 essential keys to help clean up your digestive tract, to help reverse digestive issues. That's where you start to heal yourself. That's where you start to eliminate some of this toxic crap that I talked about today. We start with the gut, because that's what goes into your mouth, or that's where the opening of the digestive tract is what you put into your mouth. So grab that downloadable PDF, go through it and take it to heart. Think about what you can do to start eliminating some of this toxic load out of your body, out of your life, out of your mind. So the link for that to download those 3 essential keys to restore your digestion is below. And please do share this video, share my channel, like and subscribe, leave a comment. What are some of the things that you have identified that are toxic in your life that you're going to now take steps to eliminate and to remove? So love to hear from you about that. So thanks again for tuning in. Take care, and I will talk to you next time.